Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about how to think functionally about behaviour. So there's a lot of different ways that you can talk about behaviour. One of the ways you can talk about behaviour is to say that it has both form and function. So the form of a behaviour is just descriptions of what the behaviour is. So as I'm sitting here, you can see certain things about my behaviour. I'm talking, you can hear the words that I'm saying, I'm moving my hands, these are things that are observable, it's the form of my behaviour. But there's also covert behaviour, so there's things happening under my skin as well that you can't see, and we could sort of also talk about the form of those behaviours. The function of a behaviour is more to do with the consequences of a behaviour or the impact that a behaviour has or the purpose of a behaviour. So if we use a common example of, say, eating, for example, eating has form and function. You might watch someone eating and you might be able to see them eat and you can see how much they eat or, like how big of a mouthful they take or how long it takes them to eat. Those are all examples of the form of their behaviour. But the function of eating is, a different thing entirely. So we eat for many different kinds of purposes. So sometimes the function of eating might be to alleviate hunger, but we don't always eat in response to hunger. We might also eat because we feel bored. So eating might kind of function to alleviate boredom. It might have the consequence of alleviating kind of boredom for us. Or we might eat for comfort. So sometimes eating can also serve the function of kind of removing or diminishing some internal state that we're finding uncomfortable. We might be feeling anxious or sad. Eating might help us to sort of escape from that. We might also eat for politeness, for sort of social reasons. So eating might be, if someone kind of brings us a cake that they made to work, we might kind of eat a slice of the cake because we don't want to feel rude or we don't want to offend the person. So it might have the function of, I might be eating, but it has that sort of function of sort of, facilitating a certain social interaction, keeping someone happy, and for me to kind of not feel rude in the process. So one behavior can have all sorts of different functions. I mean, even the first bite that you have of a meal sometimes has a very different function to the last bite. The first bite might be kind of driven by hunger. The last bite might be, driven by some rule around having to finish everything on your plate. So there's no way that we can kind of tell just from looking at the form of a behavior how it's functioning. If I see someone eating, I don't know which of those kind of possible functions might be sort of, driving their eating in that moment. So how do we figure out the function of a behavior? Well, we have to kind of look at the contextual factors that are influencing that behavior. So the first thing we do is we build up a picture of context around that behavior. And as we do that, the functions of the behavior kind of become clearer. So, but what do we mean by context? Context just refers to anything that can kind of influence the behavior. So context can be external, so an environmental context, external environment, so the situation you're in, the room that you're in, the people that you're around, what's happening around you. But context can also be internal. So we all carry kind of an internal context with us. So wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you're also experiencing thoughts and emotions and sensations and urges, and those things form part of the internal context for your behavior as well. So when we have a behavior to determine the function, the first thing we need to do is build up a picture of context around that behavior. So let's look at an example of this now. So let's say I gave you a behavior and I'm just going to give you a behavior and I want you to practice just kind of seeing if you can come up with some ideas or some hypotheses about what the possible functions of this behavior might be. So here's the information I'll give you. So Jenny is laughing. What do you think the function of Jenny's laughing might be? So what might that laughing be kind of in the service of? I haven't given you much information there. But you might find that your mind already starts coming up with some ideas about possible functions of that behavior. Maybe she's kind of trying to express that she's found something amusing to someone. Maybe it was kind of an involuntary kind of laugh response that she's kind of had. Okay, well, let's give you a bit of information. Jenny is laughing in response to someone having told a joke. What are your thoughts on possible functions of that behavior? Any other ideas? Take a second to think about it. Let's add some more context. Let's say Jenny is laughing in response to her boss having told a joke on her first day of work, even though she didn't find it funny. Okay, now what are your thoughts about some of the possible functions for her behavior? And again, you might have a few ideas about this. You might kind of think, well, is she kind of just feeling nervous? Is the laughter functioning to sort of alleviate some nervousness, or is it about sort of trying to get in the good books with her boss by laughing at one of his jokes? So there could be different functions there. Even at this point, it's still hard to kind of determine what the exact function is. So let's add some more context. Let's put some more context to this. So let's say it's Jenny's first day at work and she's under a lot of financial pressure. She's feeling extremely pressured to keep this job. She goes to work and she's experiencing these thoughts like, what if I don't fit in? What if I can't keep this job? And in the context of those fears and anxieties, she laughs at her boss's joke, even though she doesn't find it funny. And her boss seems pleased and Jenny feels kind of relieved that she's done the polite thing. So now what are your thoughts around what are some of the possible functions of her behavior? So in this situation, you might see that the functions of her behavior are kind of linked to some of those consequences and outcomes. So maybe, now that we understand that Jenny's feeling all this kind of financial pressure to keep her job, some of that kind of laughter might be like around, I'm feeling less anxious about losing her job, or feeling more relieved about feeling like she's kind of done something to fit in, and the importance of kind of pleasing her boss because he's kind of connected to her being able to keep the job. So that becomes an important outcome for her as well. So all of these kind of possible sort of functions become clearer. And kind of hopefully what you can see in this is that if we take that right back to the original information that we had about her behavior, Jenny is laughing, like none of those possible functions are really kind of clear at all just from seeing that behavior. It's not until we start to kind of add more contextual information in that some of the possible functions start to become a little clearer for Jenny. Now, of course, this is only one instance of the behavior that we're looking at. So we might see Jenny kind of laughing in response to her boss's joke at work, but it's only kind of one example. So it's hard to sort of tell, would similar situations kind of prompt the same behavior from Jenny, or is this kind of a one-off event because she's nervous about keeping her job? We could ask about that. We could sort of say to Jenny that seems like it was really important for you to kind of please your boss in that situation, given how important it is to sort of keep this job. Is that sort of something that's unique to that situation, or do you sometimes do similar things in other situations? And Jenny might say, yeah, actually I do similar things in other situations. I'm often trying to kind of, keep my friends happy or please other people in my life, or I've done that in other jobs as well. So we might find that Jenny does similar behaviors in different kinds of contexts in order to kind of keep other people happy, or to sort of, to acquiesce to other people. And if she does do behaviors in lots of different kinds of contexts that all sort of achieve the same outcome, then we say that those behaviors are functionally equivalent. So they all kind of result in the same function. We might even ask Jenny about whether this behavior is kind of a new behavior, or whether she has done similar things for a long time in her life. And she might kind of, maybe she might tell us that actually she does remember doing this even when she was young. So let's add one final piece of contextual information to this, just as a way of better understanding the possible functions of Jenny's behavior. So we'll add this piece of context. Jenny grew up in a family where her father was volatile, and where her mother was fragile and would often kind of experience high amounts of distress. And in these environments, Jenny learned to be very watchful of the needs of other people. And learning to be watchful of the needs of her parents in that situation helped to kind of minimize the likelihood that her father would have an angry outburst, and also helped to kind of minimize the likelihood that her mother would sort of have a particularly distressing episode. So in doing that, Jenny kind of was able to sort of feel a little safer in her environment and have some sense of being able to have some control around what was happening around her. In that historical context, Jenny goes into her new job and she laughs at her boss's joke, even though she doesn't find it funny. Now that we've added that piece of context, does it kind of give us any more information about possible functions of her behavior as they link to her historical context? It maybe kind of clues us into the fact that some of these behaviors, which might be just unique to that situation at work, might also be behaviors that kind of function to help keep her feeling safe. That maybe learning how to please other people from a young age, or learning to be kind of watchful for opportunities to please other people has been something that's kind of become, a well-rehearsed repertoire for Jenny. because it helped her feel safe. So there might be one of those functions of her behavior in a situation at work, that this actually functions to help her feel safe even now. So this is just a little example of like what we do when we're trying to figure out the functions of behavior, that we kind of, and there are much more formal ways of speaking about it and much more technical ways of speaking about how to do functional assessments. But in general, if you're thinking about how do I work out what the likely functions of a behavior are, we do it in very much the same way as we did with Jenny. We want to build up a picture of context around the behavior. That includes the external context and the internal context and any relevant pieces of the historical context, in order for us to kind of better understand what the functions of that behavior might be. I picked laughter in this situation because it's actually a pretty innocuous behavior. There's no reason why you would necessarily, as a clinician, kind of target laughing and think that's a behavior that's really important to look into. But we definitely kind of can see that if we stay curious about behavior and we can kind of lean into it and explore its functions, that we can, potentially even innocuous looking behaviors can kind of serve different functions for people that could be clinically of interest. So if you're interested in any of these ideas, or if any of this stuff seems clinically relevant to you, feel free to check out my website or my Facebook page for future videos, or to sign up to my email list, and keep an eye out for future workshops where we talk about how to use these ideas of kind of functional assessment and functional analysis in the therapy room with your clients in real time. Thanks for watching.